Well, that's the sign of the hour, the top of the hour. So welcome everybody to the MPF webinar series. Today's topic is business development, best practices, and what firm leaders can do, should perhaps be doing to develop more rainmakers at their law firms. And we're delighted to be joined by David Freeman, Corey Castillo, Josh Driskell. We'll introduce them shortly, but welcome everyone. We are glad you are here. Uri, good to see you, my friend. It's been a while. We took part of the summer off with our webinars. How are things going?
Things are going great. Yeah, we took the summer off, but it's good to be back.
It is good to be back. And I mentioned our panel today, our guest speakers, David Freeman. He has started something rather interesting called Lawyer Book Builder. We're going to learn a little bit about. He's been consulting forever, like me. So David, welcome. Good to see you.
Forever is a long time. Thank you.
Well, we had hair. I did anyway. Don't make bald jokes, David. Josh Driskell, he's the managing partner of a firm out in California, Lagerlof. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, Josh.
You got it.
And welcome to you. Good to have you with us.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
And happy to have you. And joining Josh, also at Lagerlof, is Corey Castillo, who serves as the firm COO. And Corey runs a pretty tight ship, I think we'll learn as we go through today's session. So welcome everyone. We are glad you're here. We'll jump in. A few announcements. We're going to get back in the saddle on our webinar series. The third Thursday of the month, November 16th, will be our next program. And we're going to do a reprise of what's going on out in Arizona and Utah with the regulatory reforms out there, and have a couple of managing partners from firms in those jurisdictions. We have a fall symposium next week, and we'll give a complimentary registration to the first caller who reaches out to us as we adjourn this program. You can go to our website, managingpartnerforum.org, learn more about the program. We're going to hone in on talent retention. So if you're interested in that topic, want to join us in Chicago, reach out to us and we'll give you a freebie if you're not already registered. Our newsletter goes out Fridays. We're trying to be a resource to managing partners, help folks do a more effective job in what is a very challenging but increasingly important role. 117, I think we're up to 119 as we come to showtime to the best practices in business development. We've got audience polling questions. When you're registered, we asked you a few polling questions. We'll share with you some of those results. People tell us again and again, they love the benchmarking data. They love the banter and interaction among our panel as we present these programs. Give us your feedback. Once we hang up today, you will be automatically directed to a survey. Short, easy. Tell us what you thought, good, bad, and we want to build on what you guys want to learn about, and so let us know what you think. This is our first polling question. We always do this, our obligatory polling question, and this is for Josh and Corey and David, our panel, and just to give sense of firm sizes represented on today's call, if you would, go ahead and log in your firm size. We have 4 polling questions today, this being our first. I often joke that I live in Georgia. We know how to count votes. So we've got about 80% of our participants in, and gentlemen, this gives you a sense of firm sizes represented on today's call. Mm-hmm. So keep that in mind as we kind of go through the session. And let me hide that. Uri always reminds me I forget to do that. We asked when you registered a couple of polling questions, and I'm going to ask our panel to chime in as we share these results. The first question we asked: has your firm developed successful approaches to cross-selling? That's the low-hanging fruit, your current clients, growing those relationships, keep them coming back. And here's what you said: simple yes, no, or kind of, sort of. David, does this surprise you?
No, not at all. Not at all. The somewhat, it's an interesting band in there with the somewhat, because the somewhat, I think, is a really big bell curve, and there are a lot of attempts at it. There's a lot of fits and starts, and yet I think that there's just so many elements of a step-by-step process that's missing. around being able to activate more of the cross-selling behavior. I actually like to call it cross-serving. And actually, that's one of the barriers in itself, is that a lot of lawyers don't want to be looked at by their clients as, oh, I'm selling to my client. But if you can reframe it as being in service, that's something that as a managing partner you can do to create the cultural vibe that then lubricate the cross-serving machine. And I think that can move some of the yes, somewhat more to the significantly by just sort of playing those PR games and then having it as a step-by-step accountable process.
Well, in theory, current clients, the people who already know us, should be the low-hanging fruit, and taking good care of that. Josh, as a managing partner, does this surprise you?
No, it really doesn't. And I agree with David's kind of concept of the idea of moving it from cross-selling to cross-serving or whatever, internal way you want to refer to it. We've grown a lot through acquisition and through bringing on groups from other firms, and it's interesting. Sometimes it's very attractive to those teams that are coming in that they can cross-sell or cross-serve. Other times it's, remember, I'm a practitioner and I don't want to be forced to cross-sell. I want to maintain my referral relationships and I want to do X, Y, and Z. So we've been able to be nimble about that, and I encourage managing partners to think about it because it happens naturally for those that are doing it well. I mean, the way I've always described it internally is, look, they're going to if you've found a need that they need to go outside of you as the attorney that's dealing with them. What better way to do it than internally if we have the resources and the capability to do it? I'm not telling you to serve a client that we don't have the capacity or the capability to serve. That's not the right thing to do. But if we do, we should look internally first, even if that's just to give a second set of eyes on something that an outside counsel is doing, right? So it's kind of phrasing it in a few different ways, and you got to find the person and kind of what resonates with them. But I agree with David on that.
Let me move through these other questions people answered for us when they registered. The second question we presented, do they have the skill sets they need to be effective rainmakers? They're lawyers after all. And most lawyers are introverts, interestingly, and yet we're throwing them out there to meet people. And do they have the skill sets and the comfort levels to do that? Corey, let me turn to you. Working with lawyers, I'm sure trying to get them out there, missmaking anyway. Surprise to this data.
Well, so I guess piggybacking off of what David and Josh shared on the first question, the yes somewhat never surprises me because it offers folks to say, well, we're kind of doing that. And so there's not an admission to guilt and saying, oh no, we don't have that program built out. It makes us feel like we're doing something. And so the yes somewhat will always be a larger answer than the others because it should be a yes or no. Additionally, the difference between developed and applying. Have your lawyers develop the skill sets they need to be highly effective makers? Perhaps that might be the case in that they possess the ability to share what they do at a high value, communicate its value to clients and prospects, go about securing resources and assembling a case management for their clients. But the application of it's a completely different question. So I think that would be the follow-up question. It's, well, how many of them are effectively applying it? And how are we verifying and measuring that the utilization of those skills are yielding mutually beneficial results for them, their clients, and the firm?
I think, well, we'll get into the lawyer personality a little bit. And if you haven't read Larry Richards, I talk about him all the time. Uri, is anything jumping out at you as we slide through these initial survey results?
Well, that last question, when we asked about lawyers, I think that also gave sort of the firms the out. Yeah, not all of our lawyers have enough training, but our partners, oh, they for sure have enough. I think there's a lot of excuse making. I think there's a lot of false, oh yeah, sure, they're great at it. They just don't have the time, excuses internally where it's okay not to have those skills, but of course it's not. So we'll get into that a little later.
We did
and actually,
survey.
can I build on that for a second? It's just very quickly, it's interesting that I remember seeing somebody from one of the big 4 accounting firms do a presentation at an LMA conference, Legal Marketing Association conference, and they said something like, you know, you all have it wrong. You're spending all this money training your associates, yet where's the dollar going to move the most? With your partners. Put the funds to them. Yes, you need to train the next generation, but all of a sudden they become partner and you stop training them. And that's a big mistake that most law firms make, when the big revenue push is going to be by getting those who have the relationships out there more.
That's an interesting point. We ask questions periodically into your investments into lawyers, and are you investing in leadership skills? Are you investing in business development skills at the partner level, non-equity, associate on down? And we always ask about support staff, because I think they're very important to this mix as well. That manager of first impressions at your reception desk. You get one shot at the first impression, the client experience. And it has little to do with quality legal work, but it has everything to do with client experience. And getting your support staff, your paralegals, your legal assistants tuned into how important it is. When I was at the Gunster firm, David, we'd go out and do client surveys. What do you like best about working with our law firm? We'd always ask that question. And rarely does the client talk about quality work product. They're talking about people. And often they're talking not about the lawyer, they're talking about the paralegal, the receptionist. So I think let's not forget the important role our support staff play in supporting this. We talk about group leaders. Are they tuned into this? Drive in business development within their practice groups, their departments, their offices. And I think people are pretty kind here, David, in assessing their group leaders. What do you think?
I mean, if 15% are really, if we're looking at, as Corey went into some of the wordsmithing, well-trained, I don't know if I've seen that number be at that number. It's great if it is. But if I may, amongst us friends, if we can basically say, are our group leaders, are they trained to be good sales managers? Let's just really use the language here. That is what it's about. Do they understand how to manage the selling, the marketing, and the client service activities of their lawyers? I rarely find that. So, but firms that are providing some training and awakening them to that, fantastic. But I've just generally seen that there's a lot of room for growth in there. And the better they are, then they're the ones to be able to push buttons, both carrot and stick, more carrot hopefully than stick, but to be able to get the action that we're looking for.
Josh, how are your group leaders doing at Lagerlof and instilling this business marketing culture within the firm and within the people of the firm?
Yeah, even with our focus on this, I'd still say it has a way to go. I probably would have been a yes somewhat, or maybe even a not really, because, I think the tools exist. And I think this is with everything, right? We have the tools, we have the CRM, we have the marketing department, we have, those pieces, but it's, a handful of people that really utilize those to their highest and best potential, right? So, it's about it's constant reminder, and whoever said, you got to keep your partner group going, and that's really the team to kind of think about, I think is right. Yes, you've got to, think about your associates and your juniors as they're going up and getting them exposure and those kinds of things. But your partner's got to be reminded to go back to the well all the time, and sometimes even more, because they will rest on their laurels. They will say, they know how to reach me. I've been treating that client for 40 years. Great. When's the last time they sent you a new project, or why did they use X, Y, and Z firm to form this new entity, which just happened recently? And this partner was just absolutely flabbergasted, could not believe that, he was trying to point in every direction that he had fingers as to whose fault this was.
Right.
And, my answer was, it's your fault, right? And I did it in a nice way. I wasn't a jerk about it, but it's, hey, look, the only reason, that happens one of two reasons. Either there was a conflict, or they weren't feeling like that we were going to do a good job. So was there a conflict? No, I don't think so. Well, then why did we not do a good job? You formed, 200 entities for this company. Why would they suddenly now change horses in the middle of the race? There's a problem. So, we're going to do a round robin and get the client back and get a lunch and all the stuff. And I'll just point blank ask, hey, we noticed that you formed X, Y, and Z company with X, Y, and Z law firm. Did we do something wrong? And I'm probably going to get a bullshit answer, which is, no, we were just, it's a friend. And, yeah. But that's probably not really true, right? It's that we were trying out X, Y, and Z law firm to see if we liked them or not. And, the experience was kind of 6 of one, half dozen the other. So if that's the case, right, we need to be, doing a better job. And that's a good example of constantly reminding the partners, hey, you can't just rely on the fact that you've served somebody for 40 years or whatever.
To Josh's point, where we're at somewhere between not really and yes somewhat, is that the folks that we're having these conversations with now, they understand the concept. What's going to get us into the yes significantly is when that concept results into behaviors that they're kind of trickling into now. But what Josh and I are doing are reinforcing those by connecting the dots and trying to spark those aha moments, and then going, okay, this behavior led to this result. Now let's rinse and repeat, replicate, and then take that model and then hand it to our associates. So then they start to replicate that as well. And we're probably, I'd say, 24 months out from being from a yes significantly. What do you think, Josh?
Yeah, no, that's right. 12 months ago, the conversation never happened ever, right? Now we're having the conversation and people are thinking about it. It does not have, sales or whatever you want to treat this as does not happen via osmosis, right? It requires a constant, conversation. Yes, I mean, this is probably a controversial statement, but some people have it and some people don't, right? Yeah, I think that's somewhat true, but I think you can also teach the people that don't have it how to, do business development in the way that they're comfortable with. I'm never going to stand in here and send 50 emails to 100 people trying to figure out, who's going to email me back. That's not my style, but that may be somebody's style and that may work.
Right. Corey, did you want to jump in with something?
Josh, you sort of alluded, but why aren't these leaders better, do you think? And your firm aside, why do you think that group leaders aren't excelling?
Well, our firm aside, I think it's probably the same thing across the board, right? It could either come down to, they're too busy, right? Which they're really probably not, but they will say that, right? If we're too busy to do that, I can't serve the clients I have. How could you ask me to get more? You won't even fill my vacant secretary role. You won't get, whatever. Or maybe there's not a comp model that rewards this, right? And, I know we're going to get into eat what you kill and all that stuff later. But whether it's a true eat what you kill firm or it's not at all incentivized, they got to have something, right? Otherwise there's nothing to sort of trigger you to do this. I mean, grocery stores have it figured out, right? They're giving you points every time you buy something and you get 5 cents off of gas or whatever, right? That costs them nothing. Maybe across the enterprise it costs a lot, but there's something there. You're getting something. You're driving an extra half mile to go to that gas station that's going to give you the teddy bear at the end of the year over the one that doesn't. Okay, well, you can learn something from that, even if you're not going to be a firm that's going to go to an eat what you kill or modified eat what you kill model.
And I can build on that slightly. I think also in addition to that, group leaders, practice leaders, whatever, they're not necessarily trained in this set of skills. It's just not what is in their mindset. And then also, again, all of you sitting in the big chair, part of your job is to be the top of mind reminder and to remind these leaders to do certain skills and to make it a regular pulse so that it's on their mind. Because, we have the blessing of being in a very highly profitable profession, and we can let a lot of slack go and still walk away and go home with a nice paycheck. So the disciplines of doing these things are not normal or ordinary in the normal course of things, and leaders need to, like you, step it up to make them remember.
John, you want to training your group leaders, getting the right group leaders in place. And I find so often it's the senior lawyers that we default to lead the litigation group, the banking group, whatever it is, the seniors, default into these roles, whether they have leadership skills or not, or the rainmakers fall into these roles. And the leadership is very different, I think, than just being old or being an effective rainmaker. It's a different skill set, managing people.
You can be a rainmaker and not a good leader, right? Or vice versa.
You see it all the time.
Some of the best, Some of the best rainmakers I know are not good leaders, right? They don't follow the rules, right? They don't set good examples. They aren't necessarily what I would take a junior young associate and say, be like them, right? Maybe in certain respects, but otherwise, do nothing like them, right? So, you kind of have to find, how you can marry, if that's your situation, how you can marry a really good rainmaker with the leaders. How does that happen, right? How does that flow from the rainmaker down to the leadership to push it into actual business for the firm?
Josh, how do you guys identify your leaders?
I don't know, maybe Corey, you can answer that too. It's, you're part of that process.
Yeah, well, I want to close out the last question in terms of what's getting in the way of folks seeing this. The first thing I believe, paradigm. When Josh and I were bringing together our partners about 2 years ago, we asked them, are we a firm that just so happens to be a business, or are we a business that just so happens to be a firm? To really make sure that we're thinking in the right paradigm. So that's number one. The second thing, this touches on what David said, is that we're in a business that allows us to be good enough. And when we're good enough, there's a comfort that prevents us from being great. And if we're not longing to be great, we're not going to go seek the resources and the training and the skill sets that will help us get there. So that's the first part. Now transitioning to how do we identify leaders, there's the formal way and the informal way. I'll start with the informal way. It's looking at how folks respond to what we're offering. So for example, when it comes to business development, everyone says, I need an extra legal assistant, I need an extra paralegal, can you give me an extra one? What Josh and I will do is say, okay, perfect, can you submit your plan for that? And in that plan, we want to know what the investment of that is, what the need for that is, how this person will work, how they'll pay for themselves. And the folks that respond and actually come back 48, 72 hours later with a drafted plan, that's probably more likely a leader. So that's a little bit of an informal gauge in how are folks responding. The formal process is we actually have an individual development program where we're hitting on the skill sets and the competencies to develop leaders in terms of talent management, from acquisition to training to stewardship to development to succession planning, culture development, financial planning, business acumen, and team stewardship. And so we actually have these competencies defined, and we'll put together an actual program that's 6 to 12 months. They get a workbook, they fill it out, and then that's more of a formal funnel to develop leaders, not just for where we're at now, but where we're going to be 5 and 10 years out from now.
Nice.
Good stuff, Corey. Corey, what are you seeing? You work with a lot of law firms, mostly in the New York area. What are you seeing in terms of identification and training of leaders within firms generally?
John, you hit it. It's identification. How often does a managing partner go over and say to a third or a fourth year, not only did you hit your hours, but we see potential in you. We see you identify and then take action on it. I spoke with a group yesterday of managing partners, and they said we realized that it's time to change our bonus system, right? The old days of giving, to an okay performer X and to a superstar X plus a little bit. That's just not the way to go on bonuses. So they're learning of identifying and expanding and expressing that in tangible way, very tangible way. And now the downside is somebody's going to get the other message. Hey, I guess I'm not a superstar. And that's okay. That's okay.
Hey, let me ask you, before we jump into kind of our next little set of questions and such, just philosophically, do you think within a typical law firm, every lawyer has a role to play to support the firm's marketing and business development program? Or there's some people we just leave alone?
I mean, I'm happy to do a first quick answer. I think there is a yes, as long as you open up the aperture of what that role is. So I remember once I was doing a training and I was assigned to coach somebody, and I'm sitting down ready to do the one-on-one, and she goes, I don't know why the firm is subjecting you to me. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do anything having to do with business development. So I just kind of probed. I said, well, what do you care about? And she said, I'm the one who's the stickler for work product. And so we talked about it. And I said, well, do you think work product is important in business development and getting more work? Well, of course. Well, what if you took on a role of leadership of making sure the quality of the work in the firm was at the standard that people could feel proud about wanting to go out and get more of it? Oh, I could do that. So you're there, John. I mean, I think there's just so many different levels that just like on a football team, there's all these different little players that have to, not little, big, that have to do all their things to make the ball move forward.
Well, and I think they're not all on the field. You need weight trainers and you need, behind the scenes and coaching. We're not all on the field playing football game, and so all these players, I don't know. I used to think every lawyer should be force-fed marketing and business development, whether they liked it or not. And as you say, we could each contribute in different ways. I don't know that I subscribe to that anymore. I think if someone wants to sit in the closet and crank out 2,100 billable hours and be left alone, let them go. But, he who owns the clients owns the gold. And unless you have a really unique skill set, you may be fungible when things slow down. And
the only minor caveat on that, I think, is that the person that likes to sit in the back of the room, it doesn't mean that they don't want to be a rainmaker. They may have a mental model and a lack of skills that doesn't allow them to build off of whatever their superpower might be. So that there's a variation in there a little bit to be able to try to get them some one-on-one support if they do at least put their hand up a little bit and say they'd like to try it. Just wanted to add that part.
Let's move on. This was a slide you had contributed, David, David, just to kind of outline some of the things we'll be covering here. We're about halfway through the show. We have a few more polling questions, but why don't you take us quickly through what you got in mind as you put these bullet points together?
I think that when we're talking about what roles leaders can play and taking a look at the macro view of some of the big drivers of activity in a law firm to be able to get business development to happen. One of the big ones is, do you have a good network? I mean, all things being equal, they with the bigger network will win. A good network, a quality network. So taking a look at, in firms of any size, are you really nurturing the internal relationships, the collaboration? I wrote an article recently called The First Sale in Cross-Selling is to Your Own Lawyers. Mm-hmm. So you've got to build the great network internally and then, of course, externally. And that's, if you're looking at the buckets, there's a ton of buckets out there. Existing clients, former clients that we forgot about, referral sources, getting work from opponents. I mean, there's media sources. There's so many networks to build, and the great rainmakers are awake and aware. And part of your job as leaders, I think, is to get them to see what the networks are and then help them have some skills to go after them. For cross-selling, John, you said it. It's the low-hanging fruit in just about every law firm I've been in, and I've been in over 200 law firms. And it's sitting there and it's waiting, and other law firms are getting it. So having a set of systems and skills around that is powerful. The staying top of mind, we have, how many lawyers do we know that have gone into a client meeting and the client has said, hey, great meeting, I'm going to keep you in mind for the next matter? Does it guarantee that it's going to happen every time? Of course not. So I ask lawyers to change the mental dialogue to say, that client just said to you, you have permission to stay in my mind. Do things I welcome. And then the last part is by far the most important thing wrapping around everything is, like I think Corey brought it up, is they may have skills, but are they implementing the skills? Mm-hmm. And that's why I think these 4 areas, if you nail any of these to a higher level, you're going to find more revenue coming in.
We're going to bob around and weave and cover a lot of things here. And we always like to work in these polling questions, and they kind of set up what it is we want to talk about. And this first question speaks to training, business development training for your lawyers. Is your firm providing that? And we're going to make it really simple. Yes or no. Is your firm providing business development training for its lawyers? And David, as people are voting, I'm going to ask you to predict what you think most folks on today's call are going to tell us.
Oh God, I mean, it's kind of like the Corey answer, is that it could be a wide range, that it could be some level of training. Like I know firms that will do a LinkedIn lunch. And so you could check a box and say, we do training. Is it enough to create a rainmaker? Not even close. So
What's the answer? What do you think here?
yeah, I know I'm hedging. This is a really tough one.
You are
I'll say
hedging.
that
I'm
there's
holding
some
you
level
to
of
it.
I'll say that there's like at least 50% that are doing some level. Woo!
Ooh.
There we go. Hey, can I go?
Good.
Can
I don't
you
make this
excuse me?
stuff up.
Can you excuse me? I want to go get a lottery ticket.
A 50-50 proposition. Josh, are you guys doing it? How are you doing it?
Yeah, we are. We've done a number of workshops on this, and kind of going back to something that David said, different people have different strengths when it comes to this, right? And we've tried to do workshops that can, speak to them in the way that they're coming at business development, right? Giving them ideas, giving them ways in which they can sort of, jump in to that if they're scared to do that, or they don't think of themselves as a rainmaker or somebody who's doing business development. So we would be one of the 51% that said yes. I think we could be doing more. I think we could be doing more customized, type of training, right? It doesn't have to be a room full of 50 people. It can be, let's do a mock lunch. Let's do something like that. So there's definitely ways to do it.
Do you have coaches for your lawyers? Do you hire some coaching in there?
We have, yeah, certain specific lawyers we have, and it's typically been based on requests. So anybody that's asked me, I have said yes to. And what I have also done though is told them no to a particular coach and directed them in a different direction, because they'll run into somebody at name your thing, and I look at the coach and it's like, oh, I'm what was the thing, Corey? I can't remember, like a basket weaving coach or something. It was
I'm going to coach everyone on mindfulness.
No, it was an intentional joy. Somebody was a coach of intentional joy. I'm still a managing partner at the end of the day. That's not getting past
Draw
my
the
desk.
line on that one. Huh?
That was a kill shot as soon as I saw that. And I said, no, you know what? But I appreciate what you're thinking about with coaching. I don't think this is the coach for what we're trying to do and what you've shared with me, frankly, about what your goals are. How about we have you talk to X? They worked with Nick and they've done a great job for him. Why don't you talk to him about the experience? And if it sounds like something you want to do, we'll get you some sessions there and see if it's helpful to you.
And I assume you have in-house marketing people, Josh, at your firm.
We do.
And
we do.
firm size, how many in-house marketers work
We
with
have
you?
two right now. One is sort of our director of marketing, oversees, kind of the overall picture. And then we've got a marketing assistant that helps, with the postings of Facebook and LinkedIn and all that kind of thing. Between the two of them, they've got a pretty good handle on the brand, I would say, for the most part. The branding piece of it, they've done well. Marketing can be a lot of other things than just the brand, right? And it is lots of other things in the brand. We haven't yet turned the corner where they're not focused on branding, I would say. And that's probably the next piece for them, how we can do other things.
And the firm size, Josh, just to put it into context?
We're a little under 50 lawyers, about 100 and a little over 100 total people with all the administrative staff and everything. 2 offices outside of our main office, so one in another state and one in our same kind of 15, 20 mile radius, but a different
David,
location.
I'm sure you see this. I am, and in fact, helping firms hire directors of business development. They've got the director of marketing, who's doing the website and the press releases and the branding and whatnot, but the director of business development working much more directly with the lawyers on their individual relationship building, reputation building activities. Is this a trend you're seeing in the market, directors of business development?
Yeah, it is. And I have asked a few of those people, what they do, right? And I know sort of what they do, right? But it's more about how are you actually doing it? What makes you not a marketing person? They are a marketing person at the end of the day, but how are you, doing your role that's different than like what our marketing person is? And typically that's coming down to exactly what you shared, which is how do we put our attorneys in front of these individual people that are maybe, ready to make a purchase or ready to make a switch, helping respond to RFPs, those types of activities. And I'd say that's probably something it's definitely something I'm interested in exploring for our own firm. And I think probably a lot of managing partners are thinking about this. It's all right, we got marketing covered. Now how do we move to kind of this next level?
Another area is this director of professional development. I ran into a title the other day, Director of Talent Success. I thought that was an interesting title. David, what are you seeing trends in terms of in-house marketing, business development departments at mid-sized firms like those on today's call?
Yeah, I think exactly what Josh said. I think there's a really strong movement toward the business development. I was just talking to somebody yesterday or early last week, and he is in a large firm, and he said where his personal passion is that intersection of marketing and business development, meaning our marketing, we run events, we do webinars, we get all these leads, but then the leads just sit there and we do nothing with it. Let's have somebody grab all that
Yeah,
and
exactly.
do something with it and put it into some level. I'll use the word pipeline. I don't want to get too, sales speaky, but at least grab those leads and do something with them. And that's where a business development person could do it. So all these pins are beautifully lined up, but our lawyers don't really follow up. It's that guarantee implementation piece that was up on the slide that a good business development person could help knock down.
Corey, you want to jump in here? Uri, I'll invite you to share what you're seeing.
So in terms of offering business development training, I think it's important to have an ongoing series of engagements that hits on not just business development, but business development adjacent workshops. So for example, if the word business development or the concept is intimidating and there's a barrier to receiving it, it's like, well, we're going to do a workshop on personal branding. We're going to do a workshop on relationship management. We're going to do a workshop on strategic thinking. Oh, guess what? All of those things are business development. And then making that as a programmatic series that's ongoing so as to foster a use it or lose it understanding of it is really important. And Josh and I hit hard on this last year. We did 17 workshops throughout the year, all sitting on business development or business development adjacent functions. Then we met that with a one-page plan template, not intimidating, not extensive. People can fill it out in 20 minutes. It's just, what's your vision? What's your goal? What's your objectives within your goals? What are your strategies? What are your tactics? And doing that in a specific and measurable format. And then you just set up 2 follow-up dates to make sure that you're on pace. And that's it. That's it. That's the introduction to business development. And as soon as folks just start to get comfortable with that, then results start to appear. And it's like, whoa, what do you know? 2 years later, I guess this thing actually helped out.
Playing the role of the watchman. We're going to throw another polling question in here, and
John, I just have a question. I just have a question in the context. I don't want it to.
And I'll launch the question, or is your comment?
Okay.
Vote on this one.
We got this question from Lafayette, Indiana, for our panel. The question was, how experienced should lawyers be? This is for our panel. How experienced should lawyers be before you start to expect business development activities?
That's a great question. I'll take a first shot at it, which is, and I'll go, of course, generic here. The first few years in most firms, lawyers are just trying to figure out their way to the bathroom and how to practice law. If they do have connections and they can make introductions, encourage it. I mean, I think that's great. To start giving them training at that point might be a little early, other than maybe a light training on how to navigate your network, how to grow your network of the people that you know from high school, from college, from law school, and so on, because that's a good pre-measure to what your success is going to look like down the road. And so many lawyers I've coached have let those people slip away. And then it's like 10 years later, and they're like, oh yeah, wow, this person's now leading this division, and I should have stayed in touch.
Biggest
exactly.
In town, and it used to be my, keeping those relationships fresh.
Yeah, so, but generally sort of that upper middle to senior level associate is when you talked about requiring versus desire, as they're starting to realize they're not going to get fed anymore and they're going to have to build their own book of business. As their hunger grows, their interest and desire doing it grows, and therefore they're going to be more willing to take to the training you give them.
Yeah, maybe I can kind of add to that. Oh, go ahead, John.
No, you go. Josh, you go.
I was just going to say, and the poll's still up, by the way, in case you want to move it. I take the kind of approach that this is something that we can start on right away. And David, I totally hear your point about, yeah, you're still trying to find your way to the bathroom, all that. That is absolutely true. They will be worthless for the most part in business development activities, unless they do have, some type of connection or something that they can exploit, or a family member or something like that. But, I sort of view it in the same way that probably a lot of the managing partners say, contemporaneously record your time. If I start with the expectation on day one that you are going to have some business development responsibilities, it's much easier for me to back into that over time and train them and give them resources and all of that when they see that everybody does it, right? Or that I do it and I'm part of, I'm their supervisor or whatnot. And that can mean taking them to lunches, even though I know they're probably not going to have a whole lot to add. Although if you're gonna, I typically always have a junior on most Zoom meetings with clients and things like that, or even internal meetings, not because I need help. It's because I want them to see how these meetings are done, and I want them to, get exposure to that. Throwing them a question from time to time as part of that in that meeting will kind of give them that comfort and give them the ability to actually be a contributor, probably sooner than just waiting for them to naturally discover it on their own. At least my thought on it.
And yes, John, the poll is still up, just in case.
Yeah, I know. I'm going to get there in a minute. Hang on. I'm in, because David, I think, I often cite the ABA some years ago published a model diet for associate attorneys. This is the ABA, not us marketing people, the ABA. And it prescribes a 2,300 hours per year all in that well-rounded associate diet. 2,300 hours, 1,900 billable. Most firms are coming at 1,800 billable hour expectation. But here's the ABA prescribing 400 non-billable hours in a well-rounded associate diet. CLE, pro bono, service to firm, but it prescribes 100 hours a year, 2 hours a week, marketing and business development to a well-rounded associate diet. I like the idea of getting them into habits early. There's an expectation here that when you join our firm, we expect you to get out involved in the community, join an organization, maintain your contact lists, show up at firm events, whatever it is. Start them on a tricycle early, and then move them up to a little bike with training wheels, and then you move them up to a big bike, and then they get into these habits early. That's my philosophy. No right or wrong to it. But here's our polling question. You all were voting, and let me share these results. And David, I'm going to put you on the spot again and ask you to predict what you think most of our crowd are going to come in on with this question. Require, I underline that word intentionally. Does your firm require lawyers to submit plans? Let me substitute that.
I'm not seeing a lot of firms, certainly I don't think it's going to be the majority, are requiring the partners to submit plans. I would love to see it, but I'm not quite seeing it as much as I would hope.
Corey, what do you think?
Yep. David nailed it. I no way.
Yeah.
Does your firm require it? No.
What they say. I should have changed that in our question slide, require its lawyers to submit, because I came in and broke down this answer a little more between all lawyers, partners, associates. 31 plus 14 equals 44, 50. How do I add that? That equals 45.
No, there's an overlap.
No, but partners and all attorneys includes partners.
I know. And then partners only, add those two numbers, 45% would require at least their partners to have a plan. I don't believe that. I think they talk a good game, but at the end of the day, it's kind of an optional thing. But that's that question. Let me move on here and make sure I'm punching the right buttons. I thought this was a really interesting question, David. You contributed to our questions. This is our last one. And it's, how does your firm track, if at all, business development activities within the firm? And we put a few answers out there. This is check all that apply. So if you're tracking time, marketing time, you're tracking results through origination. If you're tracking activities, how you making sure people are getting this stuff done. And David, as people are voting, what do you see as the most common ways to track the time, if we're doing it, or the activities? what's the best way to do it?
Yeah, I mean, I see hours because our lawyers are trained under the hour carrot of we're used to putting hours in for things. And, that's a proxy, but I would much rather see activities even over results, because especially business development is the kind of thing that you've got to go plant the seed, you've got to water the seed, you got to put sun on it, you got to till the soil, and the results may take forever. I want to be able to constantly, as a leader, be able to, give those carrots, if we're going to use farming metaphor, to give those carrots to clients to say, we're patting you on the back that you did the right activity. And that's the right thing. And we're telling the right story. And then, you layer gamification on top of something like this. And I've seen firms have great results. One firm did the client service Super Bowl. And they during the Super Bowl weeks, they would give out 1 point, 3 points, and 7 points for different activities based on how, quote unquote, important those activities were. And in a 70 lawyer firm, they counted 600 activities in the first week. And that's powerful. And they weren't giving away, big financial prizes. It was more for recognition and pride. And this was all self-reporting, but it was cool. And they made it fun. And they created this vibe of this is what's important in our firm, and we're communicating it a lot. So
Corey,
I'm a big fan of activities.
Corey, how do you guys track it? And what do you think is the best way to track it?
Right now, we're tracking it in terms of recorded hours. I would also like to track it in terms of business development plans as well, because the recorded hours captures just that, time. The business development component, in terms of translating it into a plan that's live and actually notes progress, colors it with what's coming out of it. It gives it a qualitative overlay in which we can actually affirm successful activities, connect them to results, and then have a strategic conversation on, okay, perfect, how are we going to level this up even more to get what we're shooting for? So I would like to track it manually as well, because then that obviously, of course, sparks ownership and consistency.
And our friend Peter Drucker, the world, one of the top business authors of all time, what gets tracked gets done, what gets tracked improves. So I think if you want to see these activities and you want to see people get better at them, finding some method to track and reward. We haven't yet talked about rewards. 26% do not track it. David, what would you advise those 26% on the call that don't track any of this stuff?
I would just say start small. I've seen firms do things like this month, and then you say it, this month, let's try to get you to book one more speaking engagement than you would have otherwise. Find strategic goals, if like, Josh is saying about branding. And so branding is getting your name out there. So how do you get your name out there? It could be one article, one speaking engagement, take one leadership position, just, start in bite-sized pieces. And then again, communicate the heck out of it, and little storytelling, and the internal PR game is critical when you're a leader, because that is what everybody I talk to wants: a culture of business development. That phrase, the word collaboration and culture of business development are like the biggest search terms, I say facetiously, when I'm talking to law firm leaders. So your job is to then support that. And the phrase culture of business development, that's a phrase. You've got to break it into very tangible, measurable activities, and that's how I would suggest starting something like that.
Well, in terms of not tracking it either, you can't expect what you don't inspect.
Right.
You've got to see something in order to try to improve on it, or to reinforce it, or to scale it.
Josh, any comment? How you feel about tracking these things?
No, I think that's really not already been said. I think tracking, it's kind of the initial start, right? That's if you're not doing anything, I think you start there, because the attorneys are already thinking about that, right? But then you start to move through an activities and results-based culture, because if somebody's tracking 40 hours a month of business development and has not brought in a single client, okay, well, where are the results from that? If you're really truthfully spending 40 hours and it's gotten you nothing, then let's redirect what you're doing, right? Clearly it's not working. So let's figure out, where we can put that energy that should be, getting you a little bit more bang for your buck.
Yeah, and I think particularly for younger lawyers who don't yet have the gray hair, their networks aren't yet in positions to hire or refer outside counsel, we need to give them a little time here to build it up. And I think it all starts to fall into place at about 40, 45 years old. If you've been maintaining your networks, developing your reputation, developing your relationships, the payback comes, it's a long game. It's a long game. And I think early on for a young lawyer, rewarding the effort is important if you want to see that effort, because they don't think in terms of the long game, these young lawyers. They're thinking of the billable hour and probably putting in as few of them as I possibly can, because I like my work-life balance. And,
yeah, I would add something to that. This will vary firm by firm, and I get that. One of the things that I try never to do is when you do have a young associate that's bringing you their first, or they're starting to get their feet wet a little bit with business development, and they're bringing those first few clients, they're going to be terrible, right? Probably. They're not clients that you would, if they called you.
Look at this minnow I just caught, Dad.
Exactly. One of the worst things you can probably do is say, we don't want that client, whatever, throw it back. Exactly. I mean, that's a recipe for never coming back again, right? So
you would let that minnow in the bait bucket, huh? Just to encourage and get that young lawyer feeling confident, feeling good, even though it's not quite what we might be fishing for.
Yeah, I would. And the other thing I would do in that case, and I'd say, hey, look, all right, well, this is a great client, for you. This sounds like a good deal. It sounds like it could, lead to more or whatever, right? I'm going to oversee you handling this, and this is going to be your deal. It's going to be your client, and you think you can do it, and blah blah blah. So, I think it's somewhat that reaction that you have, right? Because they're not going to bring in, your A-list client. This is not going to happen. Right.
No,
It's unlikely to occur.
Josh brings up a good point here, because the best training is letting folks fall and scrape their knees. We can have all the workshops in the world in which we simulate what conversations should feel like and what business plans should look like, and that's an effective play. But ultimately, to Josh's point, it's, well, when folks do execute on that and they fall and scrape their knees, it's allowing them to do that again and again and again and again, as they refine their personal way of going about ultimately delivering on development and the results that we're shooting for.
I so often, the intake, when we look at the new clients, the new matters and the intake, and where do we set the bar, and do we bring in stuff we really don't want? It's not consistent with our long-term firm vision or strategy. That's an interesting question to contemplate too, when you have young lawyers who are out there dutifully implementing their marketing and business development, and they don't catch quite what we're looking for, and figuring out what you want to do when they bring in those fish that those catfish.
Yeah, and we don't take things that the firm would never do, right? But it might be a sale of a laundromat or something very, very minor, right? We're doing transactions of 30, 40, 50 million bucks. It's okay. The laundromat's kind of easy, but it's would I take it? No, probably not. I'd refer it somewhere else. But I want them to get that experience and that kind of thing. If they brought in a criminal law matter, firm doesn't practice that. I'm going to say, no, but let's find a good referral source. Do you know anybody? Where should we go with that? Because that's obviously a part of business development as well that we haven't even really touched on.
Well, yeah, and everybody should be fishing in the waters where the firm wants to catch fish, right? This should be done in the context of firm goals, practice group goals. And, I find so often firm leaders don't share that vision, that big picture strategy with the young lawyers. And they kind of want to know where things are going and how do I fit. Often that piece is missing. David, you wanted to put these things in here toward the end, kind of where the rubber hits the road, the implementation piece. Despite our good intentions, so often these marketing and business development plans don't get implemented. Take us through what you got here. And
can you drop the poll off the screen?
Do what?
The poll is still up for me, at least.
Oh, I'm sorry. See,
No,
I
it's all
always
good.
forget that. I always forget that. Hurry,
Yeah,
you're
let me go.
supposed to be reminding me when I don't take down the poll.
Yeah.
You got to set up a little electric prod on John's seat. I think that's the way to do it.
That'll work.
Yeah. Yeah, I just want to, this kind of wraps up everything in a way. Like, how do we, quote unquote, guarantee people are going to do all the things we want them to do? So let me go along the top row really quickly, and then rest of panel jump in if you'd like. Setting up goals, because a lot of times our lawyers don't really have a good understanding of the goal is, one speaking engagement every quarter, whatever it is for you. Have them establish and tell you what the goals will be, because for different people, it'll be different things. Do they have good contact lists? So when they get that half hour or whatever, and they're going to do business development, are they actually going to have something they can go to immediately? And a lot of times people are fumbling around, their lawyers are fumbling around, they don't know what to do next. Another technique for guaranteeing implementation is using the calendar. So I'm going along the top here. I talked to John Remsen today. Let me put it in my calendar to talk to him in 3 months. And this way it's not left up to their minds. There's a system. And then the last one on the top right, scheduling time. This is about lawyers hiring themselves. Like John said, it's 2 hours a week or whatever. Put it in your calendar. Make it inviolable in the slot that has the least chance of slipping off. And then the 4 along the bottom are what I call the watcher systems. And so do you have a buddy that you could do it with? And a lot of firms, when I'm coaching lawyers, I'll ask them to create a business development buddy, because my coaching will end at some point. So who can you work with that can keep this alive? Next to it, groups. So firms of any decent size, they're creating cohort groups, so that pods of 4, 6, or 8, and it could be 2 or 3 pods, but they go through a structure together, and they hold each other accountable. They co-present, they co-peer coach. And then they're also getting that collaboration, getting to meet each other. The cross-selling happens. There's a lot of good things that happen in cohort groups. Some lawyers will use their assistants. Certainly pre-COVID, a couple of lawyers that I coached, they would have their assistants remind them and help schedule 2 to 3 lunches a week. And that was a beautiful thing to farm out to an assistant. And then I know other lawyers who will tap into the marketing and business development team. Like one lateral showed up at a firm and he said to the marketing department, "Do with me as you will. You know how to make things happen. So what would you do to me and for me so that I can absolutely maximize my client development?" And I don't know if anybody else has any comments on the guarantee implementation bullets there. And John, you do have the poll back up again.
3 minutes. I just want to keep our eye on the clock here.
I think there's 2 ways about going about the menu of resources that David just shared. And there's the formal way in which we actually utilize them. Then there's the cultural way where we actually uplift their value. And I want to share how easy it is to do this just by asking questions. So for example, as we're trying to steward people to think and then behave in different ways, when they say something like, "Oh, my goal is to get more clients next year," asking the questions, how many, from where, by what time? When you say next year, that's 365 days. What is your cutoff day? What type of clients? What do you want to service them with? And asking probing questions that moves them from thinking conceptually and ambiguously to very concretely and tangibly. And just by function of doing that, they'll start thinking in that more measurable and systematic way, and then their behaviors will start to change. But what I want to share with this group is that asking those questions is really easy to do, but it's also really easy not to do, because we're doing so much stuff throughout the day. If someone says, "Oh yeah, I want to go out there and network," it's really easy to be like, "Okay, cool, you go, get it done, have fun," as opposed to saying, "Go out where? Network with who?
Right.
What do you mean by networking? What do you expect to get from that 5-hour investment that you've got planned for next week? What's on the other side of that?" And if we just take the extra 2 minutes to probe those questions that could be annoying sometimes, but offers them a value that actually prompts them to think in that way, so they don't just come back next week and go, "Yeah, I still want to network more. Oh yeah, I still want to get more clients." Otherwise, just saying stuff over and over and over and over. And then instead of experiencing a year of growth, we experienced 1 week 52 times.
Yeah, I'm often, all right, goals, great. We're going to get close to the clients. Great goal. Who, what, where, when? Give me the specifics. Give me a deadline.
Yes.
Otherwise, it just tends to get kicked down the road, the road. We'll get to it later, The billable hours for today, we got to deliver that for the client, but this non-billable firm building stuff, it's not as urgent, but certainly really, really important. David, we are almost out of time, but I know you wanted to talk a little bit about this new thing you've got going on called the Lawyer Book Builder. Tell us a little bit about it. Here's a QR code where folks can go to get more information.
Yeah, the poll is back up. You got that sticky poll that keeps popping up.
I keep hiding it and it keeps coming up.
You keep trying, man.
I know.
Yep. All right. So there we go. So just very quickly, I spent COVID building my clone. And I've worked with law firms for almost 30 years, trained and coached over 10,000 lawyers, and I found a way to pack all of that into an online program that I've created called Lawyer Book Builder, and it helps lawyers go through a self-study process to turn themselves into better rainmakers. So you can kind of put your phone up to the QR code, it would take you to the website, or lawyerbookbuilder.com, and if anybody has any questions, I'm thrilled to answer them.
And this is for an individual lawyer. They subscribe to this service and it helps them get on track to build their book?
Correct. And some firms are going and getting a group of them so that they can be in cohort groups and work together. But it's based on a self-study process, even though people can go through module 1 at the same time and then debrief and so on. Then everybody at your own pace go through number 2 and so on. So that's
so everybody, we'll send you this in the follow-up email we'll be sending around to everybody. If you want to learn more, there's our QR code as well. So go check that out if your firm is serious about putting some marketing and business development in play. David, thank you. Corey, Josh, thank you. Here's our contact information, and all of us are available to chat offline if you'd like to continue the conversation. Our phone numbers, email addresses here, and we'll include this as well in the follow-up. So thank you again for being with us, everybody. We are just beyond the top of the hour, and we try to end these things on time, because if we don't, we hear about it in the post-event surveys. Uri, thank you as always.
Thank you, John.
And thanks for being here, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, y'all.
All right.
Awesome. Thanks,
Great.
guys.
Thank you, guys. Really,
that was great.
Thank you so much, Josh. Thank you for your input. Uri, same. This was great. Very interesting conversation.
Yeah.
All right, folks.
Awesome. I'll see you guys all in Chicago, probably.
Okay. Take care, everybody.
Chicago.
Yeah.